So although the video is entitled Squirrel Attack on Lawnmower, I'm not 100% sure it was a squirrel, but came to use Lawnmower the other day, and as I was starting it, I noticed that fuel was coming out of the fuel tank, and when I looked closely at the fuel tank, I noticed right here there's a hole, and it's not a crack, it's it's been grated against something, or something's eaten it. It looks almost as if someone's used it as a saw bench and the saw's sort of gone into it, but that hasn't happened. It was left outside in our garden, but I can't for the life of me figure out what would have actually sort of tried to eat the corner of that. So either some very hungry squirrel trying to get into the fuel, or I don't know, I mean, some sort of bird maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, nonetheless, basically the issue is that when it's full of fuel, filled through here on this lawnmower, it basically comes out of that hole, which isn't great, and the fire risk and that sort of thing. It's actually a really good lawnmower. It was here it is. It's called a McAllister Briggs & Stratton engine 300 series. I've had it for years. It's been super reliable, super good. It starts really well. Anyway, so I'm going to basically fix it, and the way that I think I'm going to fix that is probably clean this up with a bit of isopropyl alcohol first of all, to make sure that it's a good clean surface. Maybe rough it up around the edges, although it's pretty rough enough already, but maybe a bit more. And then I'm going to use a bit of fiberglass matting and some glue, some epoxy resin to make up a kind of repair to that. So we'll see how that goes. So the first step I think is probably to clean it up. Actually, I think before I do that, I'll just show you the matting and the glue I'm going to use, and so we can take it from there. All the chemicals and sandpapers and that sort of thing. Okay, so for the repair, I'm going to use rough up the plastic to make sure that the epoxy resin sticks to it with a bit of 80 grit sandpaper. Then I'm going to clean it up with some isopropyl alcohol, good alcohol, general purpose degreaser and cleaner. This stuff I get from Amazon actually, and it costs about £8 for a litre. Brilliant stuff, good for all sorts of things. I'm then going to mix up some epoxy resin to essentially make up epoxy resin to use with this piece of woven glass mat. This epoxy resin also bought from Amazon, absolutely awful. It was about, I don't know, 20 quid for the two containers, part A and part B. It's called 30-minute epoxy. I don't know if it's gone off or something like that, but it's even when it's warm, it's super thick. It doesn't mix at all well, almost gelatinous. I think it's just gone past its best by date. It does work. It does harden. I've tried it. I wouldn't use it if it didn't work, but it's hard to mix. It's kind of very stiff to mix. And also it takes a good chunk more than 30 minutes to harden. I'd say more like 24 hours. Anyway, and then there's the bit of glass matting that I'm going to use to patch over the hole. I'll put a layer of epoxy resin on first, then the glass matting, cut that to shape, and then some more resin on top. So the first step is to sort of buff up the edges of the fuel tank to make sure that things stick. I'm sure a little bit of plastic will get into the tank, but I will drain the fuel out afterwards, and just clean it out afterwards. I was tempted to sort of vacuum it a bit, but I was thinking if I vacuum a fuel tank, it's going to suck petrol fumes into the vacuum cleaner, which I would imagine would ignite with the spark of the motor, so I'm not going to do that. So I think I'll just buff it up I'll scratch it up with a bit of sandpaper and then clean it with a bit of isopropyl. So that's, I think, probably good enough. I can smell the petrol fumes at the moment actually coming out of the tank. So it definitely needs a repair. So I think that's probably rough enough. So the next step is to use some isopropyl, which is this stuff here. So I'm going to put a bit of that onto a cloth and just wipe around the edges of the fuel tank to make sure it's all nice and grease-free and clean and that sort of thing. I mean, actually, it's pretty clean there, on there, so it's fine. But we'll do that, and whilst that is then evaporating, I'll mix up some of the epoxy. So I found regular post-it notes are absolutely ideal for mixing epoxy resin on, because you just once you've mixed it, you just take the top one off and throw it away. So you'll see this is the epoxy. I'm going to mix up quite a bit because I want to make sure it's a good thick amount of epoxy on the repair. So I think this one, the blue one, which is is that the hardener? Doesn't actually say, but this one's kind of okay. This does come out of the tube okay. So obviously with epoxy you've got to mix equal amounts. So the idea is to get the same amount of this one, but this one's super stiff, and you can see that you've got to squeeze it super hard, and it doesn't really come out that well. I've tried in the past, heating it up in some warm water, which I think definitely helps, but yeah, it's something wrong with this. I think I'm not going to bore you to tears with me squeezing epoxy resin out of a container. Although having said that, maybe we can do it this way. I've got to judge the same amount. I think that's probably a bit more of the red than of the blue. So I'll put a bit more blue, and then we'll mix it up with a spatula, and then we're good to go. The thing about epoxy resin, there's absolutely no point in rushing mixing it, because if it's not mixed properly, it's not going to harden very well. So do take a fair amount of time. I find spread it back and forth this way, and then I go this way. As long as it's not a 5-minute epoxy, you're not having to panic. So give it as much mixing as you can possibly do. Again, I'll speed this bit of the video up because I don't want to bore you to tears with mixing up epoxy resin. Right, the next thing is to spread that over the area we're going to try and glue, and then we're going to cut this piece of fiberglass matting down to make a little patch. So perhaps I'll cut this first, so I know what I'm working with. So I'm just going to stop the video from the bench and move it across to the lawnmower. So the next thing to do is cut a patch that's going to go over that. So I think I'll just sort of cut a sort of teardrop shape. I don't know if I need 2 layers, but I think I'll just start with 1 and see how that goes. Is this a teardrop? Not really. It's more of a sort of triangle really. But I think that will go nicely over there. And once I've got the resin on, it will stick well, and then we'll put another layer of resin on top. So this is the epoxy that I've mixed up earlier. It's a 30-minute epoxy, but it seems to take a lot longer to harden than 30 minutes. I'll make this as beautiful as I can, but it doesn't have to be hugely beautiful, because it's not something that everyone's going to be looking at all the time. So don't want any epoxy to go into the fuel tank, but it's fine if it goes around the edges of the outside. So I suppose the advantage of it being thick at this point actually is that it doesn't run everywhere. So I think that's probably enough, as long as it goes to the edges of the fiberglass. Maybe a little bit more. I think you could probably use fiberglass resin for car body repair for this too, but I don't have any, so I'm going to use this. So the idea here is to then push that onto the epoxy, so that it kind of soaks through the resin matting, through the fiberglass matting. Now of course where the hole is, there's no resin yet, so we'll need to make sure we put a bit of resin on top of that. I may have to mix up a bit more, but we'll see how we get on. It's a good thing this is a sort of resin, keep on calling it resin, fiberglass tape, which is woven really, really well. It cuts brilliantly, it doesn't fray too much. So I'll just put that on there, that's right on the corner. I should probably be wearing gloves for this, but I will make sure I wipe off as much of the resin as I can off my hand and then wash it with some soapy water. Now what the solvent is for epoxy resin. I'm just going to mix up a bit more and then you can watch me do the rest of that. So I mixed up another batch of resin, so I'm just going to spread that over the top. I think that's pretty good. So I'm just going to let that harden, and maybe tomorrow see how it looks. So the repair's done. It's all, I just sanded it down a little bit, but it's all nice and solid. That was the corner where there was no plastic. It's now full of fiberglass and resin, so that'll be fine. It's not the same colour, but it's fine. It's not going to let the fuel out. It's just a lawnmower after all. So yeah, job well done, and pretty pleased with that.